So this is interesting because usually we have our guests kind of reminisce back to when they were 15. I'm going to have
Okay.
you reminisce back to when you were 16 because I feel like that was a pretty
Yes.
seminal moment for you, right? That was right
Yes.
during the Olympics. And so what we ask people is if you think back to that younger self of yours, what would Shawn Johnson at 16 think about what you're doing today?
Oh, wow. I was competing at the Olympics, which is wild to think about. I felt like I was in my 30s, which is comical. But now being a mom, I can realize how much of a baby I was. And what would I think of myself now and where I am? I am doing absolutely nothing that I ever thought I would be doing. My dream in life was truly not the Olympics, but I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. I started shadowing surgeons at the age of 13, and it was like everything that I wanted to do. So I think I would look at my life and be like, wow, that's not what I planned. But I think I would be really, really happy as a 16-year-old. I was kind of crippled by perfectionism at a young age. And I cared so much what people thought. I was only taught subjective opinion and that it had the weight of success behind it, of pleasing other people. And I feel so free of that now. I would be envious, but also excited to get to this point.
I'm so curious about that desire to be an orthopedic surgeon. Was that
Yeah.
kind of stemming from all your injuries?
Um, yes and no. I was not a very injury prone athlete. I did very, very well. I think I had one major injury and it wasn't in my sport. It was after I retired. I went skiing and tore absolutely everything in my knee, which led me to 6 knee surgeries. But besides that, I was really never injured in my sport. Very lucky. But I always had a fascination with biology and physiology. And I did a summer internship program in kinesiology. And I just loved the human body. I think because gymnastics is so physics based and it's all about manipulating your body and how you can optimize your performance, I was just obsessed with that. And I wanted to optimize that for other people.
Shawn, tell us about the journey of what happens after the 2008 Olympics, where you win the gold medal, and what happens after that.
Well, I would have told you at 16 what would have happened after that, as I was going to go back to high school and just be a normal 16-year-old. But what happens, and nobody really prepares you for it, is you get thrown into the limelight. And I just kind of got put on this path of interview after interview and crazy opportunity after crazy opportunity. I was offered Dancing with the Stars and I did acting jobs and I became a public speaker at 16, which was wild and humbling. But I was thrown into onto a platform outside of gymnastics where people wanted to hear about my story. And that was a very interesting thing to kind of grow into. I, by nature, am very introverted. I don't like stages. I like practice at gymnastics. I don't like performing. So all of this life is very different from what I would hand select. But I just kind of looked at all of the opportunities as I've been given it for a reason. And rather than push it away, I should try to figure out how to use it as a blessing. And I failed miserably at that many, many times. I learned.
Both of us are introverts, so we empathize deeply. We can't even imagine what you had to go through, but I imagine that was just totally draining to have to be on center stage all the time.
It was. I found an empowerment in gymnastics. I was the kid in school that really struggled. I was best friends with my teacher, but I didn't have many friends. I loved, homework and academics, but I didn't know how to socialize. I was always anxious. And I found that I felt superhuman when I would go into the gym. I felt like I could work to feel success rather than going to talk to a stranger. So it really helped with my shy tendency. And I got to that point where I understood I was good and I understood I had respect in that field. And so I felt I always said I felt like Hannah Montana, where I could go into a gym and feel like a different personality, but take me out of the gym and I was crippled. And so when I left the sport and had to go into this new world, it was painful. I didn't know how to do it.
It's interesting because you talk about being sort of obsessed with perfectionism. Also that when you got into the gym, it enabled you to feel superhuman. One of the things I've just been thinking about, because I have always loved watching gymnastics. And I mean, all of it is amazing. But the thing I find the most amazing is the balance beam, which is what you won your gold medal on. I've been on just a balance beam that's like 1 inch off the floor, and I can never imagine doing a flip, doing what you do on something like that. And to me, it's always felt like the hardest thing. I know everything is hard there, but to me, it's always felt like the scariest thing that you all have to do. And I'm wondering, in that mind of yours as you were little and thinking about this kind of superhuman quality, was part of you drawn to this hardest thing because it was the hardest thing?
Yes, absolutely. I am very type A. So like, if you tell me I can't, I will prove you wrong. If it's difficult, I want the harder version, not the easy version. I want to take the hard way. I'm an adrenaline junkie, but it's all internalized. And for me, at that age, when I was kind of finding my passions, I knew I fell in love with gymnastics, but then finding the little passions within the sport, the beam was just interesting to me because everyone was so terrified by it. And I just remember outside of the gym being this little kid that felt like I didn't have any confidence. And I remember feeling a rush of like just pure confidence the first time I did something on the beam and I like succeeded. And that became a drug for me. And it was just like, I love the thrill. I love the challenge. I love that it's different from what anybody else wants to do. It was, I don't know why. I don't like it anymore. It's scary anymore, but it was my thing. And it helped me come out of my shell.
How old were you, Shawn, when you first started doing gymnastics? And
I first started gymnastics at like 2.5. So like the mommy and me age is what you would say in gymnastics. I was put in gymnastics. This is kind of I'll summarize this, the stereotypical story, but I was put in it by my parents because I was a crazy child, which I've learned firsthand I have myself, who I believed I could fly. And I would jump off of the swing set, the banister, the kitchen table. I'd put my teeth through my lip, crack my head open. I was always in the emergency room. And my parents were like, she needs an outlet. Like, we need something. And I had too much energy. So they put me in ballet and dance class. I got essentially kicked out because I wouldn't listen in an appropriate way for a 2-year-old. And then my parents found a gymnastics gym and I fell in love with the trampoline because it reinforced my belief that I could fly. And I loved that like pit in my stomach when I jumped really high, kind of like if you're swinging on a playground. And it was just my happy place.
So with all that like rush of adrenaline that you're so used to, I mean, I imagine the letdown is pretty harsh. Like I'm wondering like how you've made that transition and how hard that was.
Well, I have 3 kids, so they give me that rush every 20 minutes. But I will say that chase for that was really difficult in the transition leaving my sport. I was very familiar with statistics and data as far as like elite athletes leaving elite sports and the severity of like depression and just the issues that came from it. And I was hyper aware of that again at 16. I don't know how I did this. I was hyper aware of that at 16. So when I left, I just kept myself busy. I had an agent in place and I just said, say yes to everything because I was really scared of having downtime. And so I chased it through opportunity. And I think I chased it for a few years, just doing what anybody told me I should do. And I really didn't enjoy any of it. I hadn't found that rush again, other than being exhausted, which is probably a good thing at the time. I went back into the sport because I did lose it for so long and I didn't know how to get it back. And I didn't want to go back to gymnastics, but I wanted to go back so I could feel that again. And I was back in the sport for about 1.5 years before I retired and said, this is just still not it. And I had to kind of build it from the ground up in the sense of I had to get used to not feeling that anymore. And I had to, as I would have said it back in the day, I wanted to learn how to be normal and eat normal and work out normal and not have an Olympic gold medal job and just be normal. So I started college.
Yeah. Tell us about that, Shawn. So after retirement, you start college and what comes with that and after that?
So I was supposed to go to Stanford. I had deferred 7 years. Just kept deferring. Just a little.
It's a gap, 7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So by this time, I'm in my like early 20s. I had met my husband. We had gone on a first date in Los Angeles, and he went to Vanderbilt. And he said, I should give you a tour of Vandy since I kept deferring. And I remember I flew out to Nashville for him, not for Vanderbilt. Fell in love with him. Started at Vandy and didn't even make it to my first day before I transferred to the only accredited online college at the time, which is wild to think about, pre-COVID, which was Penn State, because I was working too much and Vandy required like in-seat attendance every day. So I did a year at Penn State, and I remember having such a frustrating relationship with college because I was no longer going to be a surgeon. I remember being told I'd been in the speaker circuit for 7 years. I had spoke at MIT and Harvard and Stanford, and I remember them saying I had to take a year of speech class. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. And then I would get a bill for it. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, and I don't agree with what you're teaching. And so I had a really hard relationship. So I ended up dropping out of college a year in and just kind of continued my career, which was very painful for me, ego-wise, but I've learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Shawn, I'm so curious about your journey of, as you were naming, the external validation and the internal validation, and that you as this gold Olympian and public speaker, there's so much, as Michelle said, adrenaline, external validation for you. And part of your growth journey has been that listening to your own self, like trusting yourself. I'm curious about that and kind of your sense of call through this work.
I chased external validation all the way up until I had kids. And for me, it was, what's the biggest college to speak at? That's why it was so hard for me to drop out of college. And I was really nervous about anybody knowing that, because at the time I needed to have that degree from an Ivy League school, and it was all about titles. And so I chased that for so long, and I just kind of got exhausted by it. And I remember greatest gift of my life was my daughter, our first baby, because it literally just flipped a switch in me to where I saw this beautiful baby and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I don't actually care about any of this. I care about being a good human and raising a good human, and with like core moral values and character and joy. And I just remember at that time being able to look back on my whole career that I had up until that moment. And a lot of people would ask, like, would I change anything? But I felt like I had gone through all of that and learned all of those really amazing life lessons for my children now. And so it's really beautiful to be able to raise kids and have all of that experience behind me and say, you know what? I actually chased the highest title you could get, and I felt empty when I had it. And I felt like I had to go get another one. And it just kept feeling empty until I got to have like a beautiful purpose as being a mother. And that was fulfilling for me. So it really switched when I had kids. Now, even with every opportunity that comes our way, it's more about what is it actually for, rather than it'll pay well or it looks good, or it's like internally driven.
That's a huge, I mean, you've had to unlearn different beliefs in yourself about what success is.
Oh, yes. For a very long time. I think my husband and I have talked about this recently, but I think being an introvert and being so shy and being so young for so many years in my field was so beneficial to the unlearning process, because I just got to store all of these things that I got to witness firsthand. People within the industries who were so successful in like society's eyes, but were so empty. And I would get to go to different countries and see the most beautiful families who were so fulfilled, who had no titles. And I got to see the way people used Hollywood in a beautiful way or a poor way. And I just got to keep storing all of these. And so when the unlearning process was necessary within my life, I was able to kind of draw on all of those and learn from them from the past and help unlearn myself to become normal and healthy with like my relationship to everything.
Shawn, tell us about the role of curiosity in your life. You've been everything from an Olympian to Dancing with the Stars to mother to podcast star, and also recently another another reality TV show, right?
Yeah.
Special Forces. So tell us about just the role of curiosity for you.
Well, I married curiosity. So I am a very curious person. I am a very like a deep thinker. I have existential life questions every 10 minutes of my day, but I'm not the active seeker of the answer. I'm not good at that. And I think that's more of my perfectionism side. Like I stick with what I know, but I did marry curiosity in like the purest way. My husband is the most curious person, an active learner I've ever met in my life. And so in such a beautiful way, I get to learn so many new things through him. Every month he's taking on a new job, a new career, a new PhD, a new project. He has become a pilot just for fun. He got a PhD in psychology just for fun because he's curious. And it's a beautiful thing I've learned to be more of. So I learned from him that way.
Yeah. Do you find that when you're able to lean into curiosity, it frees you a bit, it liberates you from that perfectionism?
Absolutely. And I think that was one of the greatest gifts he ever gave me in dating. I remember, I mean, early on, I wanted to go to Topgolf. I remember this, like in my night, as I was 19 or 20, but I was so worried about what people would think seeing an Olympic gold medalist not know how to swing a golf club. So much to the point, like I would never go. And I remember Andrew was so beautifully freeing of, well, let's go learn. Let's go hire a coach. Let's go play and have fun. And he was so encouraging to failure that he taught me how to be curious again and go play and be an adult child and not worry about the perfectionism. So that was something that I had a hard time with, and he kind of gifted me, which was beautiful.
Yeah. Do you think you're getting better at playing?
Oh, yes. Now I'm obsessed with it. Even going on like this reality TV show, I would have had such a hard time saying yes to that because I would have been so worried about not being good at something, and that having, a Navy SEAL Delta Force scream in my face and say they're disappointed would have been very hard for me to ever do. And this was actually fun because it was such a challenge that when I was bad at something, I would say, okay, teach me. I want to be good at it. And that's a huge growth that I've had over the years.
And you alluded to this real strong sense of your moral foundation. Can you talk a little bit about sort of your relationship to your own kind of character formation and like how that was instilled in you and how you're trying to instill it in your own children?
I think mine stems, and my like my husband's and my kids now, stems from religious moral foundation. I think that's where we get it from, is like Christianity. I was raised with the belief of God and just kind of this inner voice. And I remember my mom just always telling me, like, I'm not mad at you, I'm not disappointed, but I want you to listen to how you feel. And if you feel guilty or if you feel shame or if you feel proud, and like you should listen to that, and that should be your moral compass. I was a very empathetic kid and felt a lot. And so I think that's just kind of guided me. But I also was a kid that learned everything the hard way and had to. I had to feel really big feelings of guilt and shame and anger to understand them and know that I didn't want that. And then I also got to just witness a lot as a kid. I started traveling internationally at the age of 12 by myself. So I got to see, a lot of injustice and poverty and corruption and, politics. And I just got to learn by watching a lot of moral character unfold. And I just kind of watched and took in, I want to be that and not that. And I want to be unifying and kind and good.
And Shawn, you and Andrew are pretty intentional about you're living into your values as a family, right?
Yes, very. We've gone through exercises where we have actually brought like counselors and mentors and professionals in to kind of like define our values as a family and teach us how to teach our children them and raise them around it. But yeah, we take them. It's the center core of our family.
One of the fun and silly questions we love to ask people is, what is one job out there that you are fully unqualified to do that you wish you could do?
Fully unqualified. I mean, being an orthopedic surgeon,
Right?
You're still hanging on to that
I would
dream.
confidently walk into an operating room and be like, "Yeah, let's do this." But yeah, I still love the doctor world and the medical world. I've seen every surgery. I've done heart transplants.
Wow.
I've seen them take the chainsaw to the sternum. I've done hip replacements, shoulder replacements, knee replacements. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They let me start standing in at 13 for them. And I did that for 6 years. Like once or twice a week, I would just go to the operating room and stand there and watch.
That's so interesting. What were you drawn to?
Again, I was a very type A kid and student. I was I was obsessed with having a 4.0 or higher. I loved math. I loved puzzles. I loved anything with my hands. I liked building things. So it was truly just the idea of, it was less, this sounds maybe cold and heartless. It was less about the person and more about like the actual problem and being able to solve that in such an intricate way. But then to see the miracle of it, of the actual human after the fact, was really fascinating to me. So I don't know. Maybe I was also a little twisted, and I'm glad I ended on the good side of that.
Well, I think also just from your own perspective to see the muscles and everything working, like where your brain is just thinking it and you're doing it and all these intricate things are happening. I'm sure it's pretty startling, and crazy. Yeah.
I think too, I made the USA national team when I was 12. So starting at the age of like 10, 11, 12, I had access to some of the greatest doctors in the world. And so I got to see so much physical therapy and athletic training to optimize, elite level weightlifters and power lifters. And I just got to see how different human bodies were, but to see the brains behind optimizing them fascinated me.
That's amazing.
Yeah, your Special Forces reality show is like this extreme boot camp, right?
It is. Yeah. It is. It's 4 former Navy SEAL, Recon Marines, SAS guys who put you through essentially BUDS training. So Navy SEAL, it's kind of like Hell Week. So through psychological warfare, physical trauma and torture and challenges for, we did 11 days. So
I love how you say physical trauma with a smile.
Michelle's like, no thanks.
It also is what got me in trouble. I'm an uncomfortable, like when I'm in like pain, I smile and I giggle. I just always have. It's probably not a healthy thing. I should probably go to a therapist for it, but it really got me in trouble on this show. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. They thought it came across as like disrespect.
Right, like you're mocking him. Yeah.
Whereas I'm like, no, like I highly respect this. I'm just very uncomfortable.
Deeply uncomfortable. Yeah.